a set, or is this an actual place that you found, and where did you find it?
The actual town?
Yes, yes.
The town is a town that is about 45 minutes northeast of Toronto, where we shoot the show, and
Not called Schitt's Creek.
it, and it's not called Schitt's Creek, but it is called Goodwood.
Close enough.
And the people of Goodwood love to be residents of Schitt's Creek. Just a change of pace. So that is where the town is, and the motel is in an adjacent community called Hockley Valley. And you know, most of the interiors we shoot in Toronto, in studio, and
but the motel is a set, and the
motel
cafe
is a set, yes.
and all the interiors are sets. Oh.
You've
Sorry.
Well,
sorry.
So there is no shit.
They're leaving now.
Way to kill the reality there.
Hi.
Speaking of Schitt's Creek, I was wondering if anyone objected to calling the show that, and if you had to come up with alternative titles for the show.
We kind of knew that would be a bit of an issue. But it was, you know, it was kind of we knew it would be kind of conversation over a water cooler when it first came on. Oh, honey. My daughter Sarah plays Twyla. Stand up, take a bow. Stand up and take a bow. How could I be looking right there and not? I don't know. Well, I guess we'll discuss it later. Yeah, we knew it would be kind of a, you know, an issue, but it just seemed that the name is just an appropriate name for the show. No, I mean, kind of because of the family situation. Paul, oh my God.
I know, I just saw. Oh, we only have two directors.
Paul Fox. Paul, stand up, please. So we knew it would be an issue, but it just seemed like an appropriate name for the show, and it is, of course, it is kind of a real name.
There was someone at the CBC over a boardroom meeting who at one point was like, what if we called it Up Creek? And my dad and I from across the table were like, yeah, I don't think that's gonna work. And after that, they just went with it.
Well, it is. We did, and also we did take. There were, you know, shits on every page in just about every phone book, you know, that we kind of.
Schitt's Creek is a legitimate place in Ireland.
It actually is the name of a legitimate place in Ireland, as we found out after the fact, spelled exactly the same way. So the fact that it was a real name, and you know,
it made for some great late night bits. Yeah.
My daughter's 5, and she's taught everyone in her kindergarten class the name of Mommy's show.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Did the name have to be something
sorry,
like
Jen.
that? Because we've never been to this town before we had to live here, right? We only bought it because of the joke.
Right. Of course. And the family,
reason we own it.
You know, the family doesn't want to be living there either for that particular reason. So it all sort of fell into place.
Jennifer, how do you like having Jocelyn shit on your resume now?
I love it. And we talked one day, I remember, on set about her maiden name was Brown. So she decided not to hyphenate. I think is the conversation we were having.
It looked good on paper.
It was, you know, it's surprising to say the best role that you've had in your entire career is somebody named Jocelyn Shit.
Well, I'm glad we didn't go with a hyphenate.
So good.
Do we have, yep, this gentleman right here?
How did Chris Elliott and John Hemphill get involved in the show?
Well, Chris was again kind of a first choice because although we hadn't met Chris before, but he just kind of exuded the kind of smarm. Sorry.
It's okay.
That Roland, kind of, was to have. And I've been a fan of Chris's for years and years, right? So going way back to the Letterman show, and he just makes me laugh. But he is kind of, he can play that so well. And John Hemphill is an old dear friend that we know going back to Toronto, an old Second City guy that did a couple of years on SCTV with us our last couple of seasons when the cast was kind of, dwindling a little bit. So he was a great utility player that came in and did some amazingly funny stuff. And John really has that small town thing that what Chris can do with smarm, John can do kind of with, that small town thing. And he's created a really interesting character because he's on the surface very likable, but you just don't know what's going on underneath. You just don't know whether he'd kind of, screw you or, you know what I mean? He's just got, you can't get deep enough kind of. And it keeps it very interesting.
And Bob is back in a pretty big way. And
Yeah.
Well, this season, yes, Bob is much more present, I think. Yeah.
Do we have a last question from the audience? Yep.
Thank you. So I know it's a scripted comedy, of course, but you're also wildly talented at improvisation. Like, how much of it is improvised too?
We have great scripts.
Yeah.
But on the day, because we have great scripts, I think it inspires other ideas and we get to try things. And sometimes things aren't working great or there's just a moment and, we have the freedom and the good brains to, to work around it, work with it and come up with stuff. It's fun. It's very, I don't feel the need to improvise in any of these scenes, but I'm inspired once in a while and I know I have the freedom to do it, which is really nice. To work with people you trust, who trust you.
If anything,
am I lying?
No, you're not lying, Kathy. No, you speak truth. Yes, no, it's true. We don't, and if anything happens, usually improvising happens more maybe toward the end of the day, where you just keep adding things as a scene ends, and a lot of times those little snippets are used in a big way and become a very funny part of the scene. But, it's not, I wouldn't say there's a whole gang of improvising.
I think it's more, I would say it's more collaborative than anything else. And I think particularly in the first season and more specifically in the first episode of the first season, I think we wanted everyone to personalize what they were doing in a way that made them feel comfortable and also allowed, fortunately we have an amazing cast. And, these are all people that we trust inherently. So for me, I remember sitting down with Emily and sitting down with Annie before we started the show.
You never sat down, you never sat with
Most specifically because we had all our scenes together. And I just, we sat down and I said, well, is there anything in this first episode that you don't feel jives with what you want to do? Is there anything? And they both had incredible input into who these people were. And that was reflected in the pilot episode of the show. And I think really informed their characters from there on out. I do feel like the great thing about the first episode of this series is that these characters are fully formed, and there's not a lot of movement that's not deliberate that happens. I feel like sometimes you watch a show and suddenly a character's been swapped out halfway through a season, and it's because they weren't working. I feel like all of these characters worked, and that's because everyone brought such a personal touch to
And you
to
guys
what they
start
did.
to write really for us too, our strengths and stuff. I think the only improvising that happens a lot, at least for me, is when I see what you're wearing. And that usually will sometimes inform something, like if you have a squirrel on your back.
We were saying too that the amount of times that I've like opened that door and said something or looked at her and she's looked at me, it's like you could cut a montage together of just 1,001 hello. And then always the goodbyes at the door are
Best
always fun.
wishes.
Those are always sort of in the moment, whatever sort of happens, but you know.
And it should be noted, Dan, that you are really sort of like the costume visionary in a lot of ways about like what the show looks like and all of these people. I mean, why was sort of putting that signature touch on the show so integral, you think?
I think because I just wanted it to look how I wanted it to look. I had a very specific idea for how I wanted it to look. And fortunately, we had an amazing team. But for some reason, I don't know why, and I really don't know why anyone trusted me. But I had a very specific aesthetic for the show, and I think particularly in the wardrobe, you know, as Catherine said, the wardrobe in the show is a character like unto itself, and I think particularly for the Rose family, it's the only visual indication of where they've come from. And it allows us to not have to constantly write about the past. It projects where we've come from in such a clear way that it does all the writing for itself. So when we've sat down with Deborah Hansen, who's our amazing costume designer, the first thing I said to her was, these clothes have to be very, very expensive looking. And she had a minor heart attack because Canadian wardrobe budgets, believe it or not, are not very big.
Especially with the dollar.
So we really sat down and brainstormed how we were going to give this family the $1 million wardrobe that they should have. And a lot of that, again, was eBaying. It was a lot of designer consignment. It was, you know, and I'm collecting it all through the year because you just can't afford to buy it in a department store. So it was very important, and I think it sort of helped tremendously with the show.
Catherine, how many wigs would you estimate you've worn so far on the show?
Oh, there are so many more I haven't unpacked yet. There are whole families waiting.
In fact, I just received an email today that just said Moira's wigs, and it was from our hair person who's acquiring new wigs for our new season. So there was a long question list of, well, what kind of wigs and how many wigs and what are the kinds? Are they synthetic hair? What kind of wigs are we looking at?
Everything.
So, you know.
I like that. So
more wigs to
more
come.
wigs, seasons
Yeah.
2 and 3. But season 2 of Schitt's Creek premieres March 16th at 8 o'clock on Pop. Guys, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to Kelly Sunshine.